So Boeing just getting estimate cut at Jefferies, now more cautious on the 737 MAX. Is Boeing more cautious on the 737 MAX?
They're sticking to their timeline, so they still think that this is going to get put back into the air in the early fourth quarter. Dennis Muilenburg saying yesterday that he sees Boeing in the end game of getting this recertified by regulators. But then, of course, in contrast, you have the Southwest Pilots Union making some comments that they don't really see the plane flying again commercially until January at best, maybe March at worst. I think that timeline strikes me as more realistic because we've also heard from other regulators, most notably the European regulators, being a little bit more cautious on this, wanting to take some more time, do their own analysis of that Boeing software system that's being blamed for those two crashes. I just don't see how realistically any American carrier is going to put that plane back in the sky until you have global approval, global consensus that it's safe to fly.
Now, we do have a vice president now of product and services safety. It's a new position. Is this going to do anything to help restore that kind of confidence?
I think it helps. I think it's long overdue. And sort of reading this, I was struck by the fact of why did this not exist before? Why didn't we have an independent engineering safety organization that was its own entity? But I think it's an important step. You now have the engineers reporting directly to the chief engineer and to this specific board committee that's overseeing aircraft safety rather than their division heads. That helps ensure that any kind of safety concerns go to top management right away, and that they also don't get mired down in those cash flow earnings concerns that the division heads are obviously dealing with. I do think it's an important step, and to me it tells me that Boeing perhaps sees the writing on the wall in the regulatory environment. We've heard a number of comments, especially from the FAA chief recently. He's taking his time with the 737 MAX. That agency is obviously under a lot of pressure as well, getting a lot of scrutiny about whether it was rigorous enough in its assessment of the MAX and other aircraft, and whether it needs to modernize its assessment of these planes now that they rely increasingly more on computers.
So, and then if you broaden it out in terms of, say, from top down in terms of cash flow, like where does Boeing sit with that right now?
So what they have said is that they think that they can aggressively start delivering the planes that they have parked, and that will essentially all the cash flow that they did not get this year that they can then make up in 2020. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. The pace that Boeing is talking about feels very aggressive to me, because you also have to think about these airlines. They can't just take in hundreds of planes all at once. They have to casually bring them back into their schedule. So I don't think that will all necessarily happen in 2020. I think some of that can get pushed to 2021, which of course then pushes the cash flow to 2021. The other big headwind for Boeing is, of course, their 777X, which has not yet had its first flight. They have issues with the GE jet engine. They've now pushed that first flight back to 2020. Of course, if you're not delivering those planes, that's another cash flow source that you're not getting.